Welcome to The Explainer. We are jumping right into a genuinely fascinating financial puzzle today within the healthcare sector. We're going to be unpacking a recent, highly insightful report from Kodak Securities that reveals a totally contradictory dynamic happening right now in the hospital industry. It is a classic, textbook case of what happens when massive top-line success collides head-on with aggressive future planning. So let's just get right into the data. 18%. I really want you to think about how substantial a sustained 18% revenue growth figure actually is, especially for an established, capital-intensive sector like healthcare. We aren't talking about some scrappy tech startup here. We're talking about major, sprawling hospital networks. Experiencing nearly one-fifth growth in revenue is just an absolutely phenomenal indicator of high demand and operational throughput. It shows that money is literally pouring into the sector at an unprecedented pace.
But here's where we hit the central mystery of our explainer today. In traditional business logic, if your top-line revenue is soaring by an incredible 18%, while your bottom-line profits should naturally be skyrocketing right along with it, right? You're bringing in more money, so you should be keeping more money. Yet the data from Kodak Securities shows that hospital profit margins are completely flat. They aren't growing at all. So how on earth can top-line growth possibly result in flat profits?
Section 1. The Margin Paradox. To really understand this conflicting data, we need to examine the core friction. On one hand, we've got the high-energy reality of sustained 18% revenue growth. The hospitals are incredibly busy, services are being rendered nonstop, and the cash register is just continuously ringing. But in stark contrast, we have the subdued reality of range-bound profit margins. Now, range-bound simply means those margins are stuck in a narrow, flat band. They aren't sinking, for sure, but they certainly aren't soaring either. The money comes in the front door, but it's clearly not making it to the bottom line as pure profit.
The absolute key equation to understand here is that high growth does not equal exploding margins. Now, if you are a casual investor just glancing at a balance sheet, flat margins might trigger a total panic. You might assume the business is failing or that operational costs are spinning wildly out of control. But Kotak Securities emphasizes that this is absolutely not a sign of financial weakness. Rather, it's a very specific, highly strategic phase in a hospital business cycle. The flat margins are entirely intentional.
Section 2. Unpacking 18% growth.
So, what is actually fueling this top-line surge? The report highlights three critical revenue drivers. First up, surging patient volumes. People are seeking medical care at much higher rates, which is driving substantial foot traffic into these facilities. Second, expanding healthcare access. As insurance coverage and regional access improve, a much broader demographic of patients can finally utilize hospital services. And third, the adoption of advanced medical treatments. Hospitals are performing highly specialized, cutting-edge procedures that naturally carry much higher price tags. These three pillars paint a super clear picture of a healthcare sector experiencing just immense sustained demand. And this isn't just a temporary post-pandemic bump either. The Kotak Securities report explicitly states, quote, 18% revenue growth trend likely to sustain. Anchoring this projection in their authoritative analysis tells us that this optimistic long-term outlook is basically the new normal. Hospitals can comfortably expect this tidal wave of demand and revenue to just keep rolling in for the foreseeable future.
Section 3. The hospital expansion cycle.
Okay, so the true culprit behind our margin paradox is the expansion cycle. Think of this phase kind of like trying to upgrade a commercial airplane's engine while it's currently mid-flight. Because hospitals see that incredible 18% demand coming down the pipeline, their current facilities simply cannot hold the volume of the future. So what do? They heavily reinvest current revenue, which means significant capital expenditure, or CapEx, right back into the business. They're directing those funds toward building brand new facilities, adding hundreds of new beds, and totally upgrading their structural infrastructure. This heavy reinvestment is exactly what is temporarily eating into current profits.
And this massive influx of cash is being aggressively allocated across three main areas. First, pouring concrete for new facilities, adding beds, and securing real estate. Second, installing advanced medical equipment, because you can't just build a room, right? You have to fill it with multi-million-dollar MRI machines, robotic surgery suites, and cutting-edge diagnostics. And third, hiring specialized staffing. You need the absolute best doctors, nurses, and technicians to run this newly built infrastructure. All of this requires an astronomical amount of upfront cash.
This all follows a very predictable and honestly necessary timeline. Step 1.
Hospitals must first commit to heavy capital expenditure to meet future demand. Step 2, because that revenue growth is immediately spent on expansion, the profit margins naturally remain totally flat and range-bound. But step 3 is where the magic happens. This sacrifice directly fuels exponential capacity and future growth. By giving up short-term profits today, these hospital networks are building the physical capacity to capture even more of the market tomorrow. The short-term costs are absolutely crucial for long-term scalability.
Section 4. Horizons for healthcare.
So, now that we solved the paradox, what does this dynamic actually mean for the broader healthcare economy, and how should we view the future landscape of this sector? Well, the core takeaway you should have from this explainer is elegantly simple. A short-term plateau equals a long-term strategic win. When you see range-bound margins in the hospital sector right now, you really shouldn't see a struggling business. You should see a sector that's actively building a formidable foundation for the future. They're taking their current success and literally compounding it into concrete technology and talent. It's an incredibly healthy sign of a visionary industry.
To bring it all back to the source, the Katak Securities report sums it up perfectly. The, quote, hospital expansion cycle to keep margins range-bound. The mystery is totally solved. The margin paradox isn't a paradox at all. It's simply the natural expected cost of doing incredibly ambitious business.
But that leaves us with one final, incredibly important thought to ponder. As these hospital networks race to build the healthcare infrastructure of tomorrow, will this incredible 18% growth trend actually be enough to outpace the escalating multi-billion-dollar costs of their own expansion? It's a delicate, super high-stakes balancing act of healthcare economics, and it's one we're definitely going to be keeping a close eye on. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this topic today. Keep learning, stay curious, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.